Vulnerability is the only authentic state. Being vulnerable means being open for wounding, but also for pleasure. Being open to the wounds of life means also being open to the bounty and beauty. Stephen Russell. So last month, we focused on cultivating authenticity in order to be our true selves and let our light shine. We talked about the importance of sharing our boundaries with others to create a bridge for us to be able to connect. This month, we get to focus on the power of vulnerability. We're going to define what it is and what it isn't. We'll discover why being vulnerable is important in our personal relationships and our community. We'll talk about barriers to allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and things we can do to overcome these barriers. So personal transformation requires vulnerability. It helps us become aware of what lies just underneath the surface. Today we'll learn how vulnerability is the crucial starting point for authenticity and connection. And by allowing ourselves to be seen more deeply for who we are, with all our blemishes and imperfections, we invite others to do the same. And this creates a foundation for a thriving and healthy community. So what is not? Vulnerability is not oversharing or dumping inappropriate emotions on others. The motivation for the vulnerability that we're talking about is one that comes from a desire to fully express ourselves for the purpose of being authentic and creating connection with others. To be vulnerable is not to be without boundaries, nor is it to be a doormat for others to step on. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is a conscious choice to express our thoughts, feelings, and desires in a way that serves to nurture a life of authenticity. Brené Brown defines vulnerability as a state of emotional exposure that comes with a certain degree of uncertainty. It involves a person's willingness to accept the emotional risk that comes from being willing to be open and to love and to be loved. Some examples of vulnerability are taking chances that might lead to feelings of being rejected, talking about mistakes we have made, feeling difficult emotions, or being honest about boundaries and expectations. So here's some questions for us to ponder. What areas of your life are the most challenging to exercise vulnerability? So some of you may have heard me describe myself as a recovering perfectionist. So for me, things that can still be challenging are to share with another human being when I've made a mistake. It's a lot easier than it used to be, but it still can be challenging. And so I'm going to share a mistake I made this week. And it might not be a big deal to you all, but it was a big deal to me. And so it's a little hard to share, but anyway. So actually what's been going on for me since I took on this position is it's been challenging for me to figure out how to marry my other job calendar and this calendar in a way that works and supports my own well-being. And so one of the things that has been happening is because this is just like the most amazing experience I've ever had in my life. And so in the mornings I would wake up at like 2 a.m. and just be awake for hours because all of these wonderful ideas were coming to me, right? So I was losing sleep. And then I lost track of the days. And then this is the thing that happened with my other job. I had scheduled an appointment and I missed it. I was doing something, else. And so, of course, I felt terrible about that, right? So I contacted the person, please, can we please reschedule? Sorry, I'm so sorry, right? So we rescheduled, and oh my God, I missed the second one. I'm also a 1 on the Enneagram. I don't know if any of you know what that means, but, that was really hard for me. Oh, I'm still like, I'm feeling, so I got to ask for grace and patience, right? And I'm still, I'm feeling grateful that the person still wants to meet with me. So that's what happened, one of those things. And so it's an opportunity for me to remind myself that I'm a human being, I'm going through a major life change, and to have patience with myself and compassion. Self-compassion has been like a huge gift to give to myself. I may have shared this story before, but I was supporting someone that was going through a really hard time, and I was getting support for myself as I was supporting this person because I really needed it, and I was kind of like the perfectionist that I am, beating myself up, like, oh, I should have said this, or I shouldn't have said that, or I could have been doing this better, or whatever. And my supporter said to me, Julia, you have so much compassion for that person. How about having some for yourself? That was one of those light bulb moments. And ever since then, I've practiced compassion for myself. So here's another question for us. In what ways do you see vulnerability as being an integral part of living an authentic life? So for me, when I was thinking about this, I realized that if I'm not willing to risk being vulnerable with people and allowing them to see who I truly am, then I'm not creating the opportunity for deep connection, right? But when I am willing to take that risk and share from a place of vulnerability, then that opens up the possibility for them to do the same. And that's where we get to feel those deep connections. And for me, the most important thing in the world are those heart-to-heart deep connections. Because that's where love is, with a capital L, right? And what could be more important than that? That's what I live for, to have those heart-to-heart connections. And question number 3, how can seeing ourselves as individualized expressions of spirit influence our ability and willingness to be vulnerable in areas that may be challenging? I think this is the key. The key for me is knowing that I'm an individualized expression of spirit. That's what allows me to love myself and to have compassion for myself when I make mistakes. As a result, it's much easier for me to be vulnerable with others. After all, we're all spirit, having human experiences that give us the opportunity to wake up to the truth of who we are. Magnificent spiritual beings. So being vulnerable is about exploring the depths of ourselves and others, even when we are unsure of what we may uncover. It is stepping into the unknown, often in the face of uncertainty and fear, for the purpose of fostering a more complete expression of ourselves and thereby creating deeper connections. I had the honor this week of a person trusting me enough to be vulnerable and share some personal things with me. And the person was sharing how they had this newfound discovery that they had some inner deep healing to do that hadn't been healed, and so it was causing their relationships to not work very well. And the person was sharing that, this probably comes from whatever, right? And the beautiful thing was when they were sharing with me, more in detail of what was going on for them, the thought occurred to me, wow, this person is being vulnerable with me. Would I have the courage to actually be sharing that much with another person? And so it was a beautiful opportunity for me to be able to witness someone acknowledging that they had things that they need to heal on a really deep level. And they had made the decision to do whatever it takes to have that healing happen. And so I noticed after getting off the phone and sitting with that, how I felt a deeper connection with this person because they had shared this with me. That's what we're talking about. So why is being vulnerable important? It's necessary to be vulnerable to experience both our own self-expression and connection. And as we know, it's not always easy. We may have been hurt in the past when we were being vulnerable, or we may have been raised to not show our feelings and to keep a safe emotional distance to protect ourselves from getting hurt. So I want to read something from our Science of Mind magazine this month. Love this magazine. And it is by Ryan Alexander. And it's about overcoming barriers. Fear is often a powerful barrier to vulnerability. This fear is experienced in different ways by different people and in different situations. Shame and blame are some of the places we go in the face of such fear. For some, individual and societal frameworks and constructs may contribute to fear and stand as barriers to vulnerability. Fear, however, can be a helpful emotion because it can shed light on areas of our lives that require a closer look, as well as on areas within our communities and society that require change. Looking at this fear supports us in creating safe spaces for vulnerability. So the gift we give by being vulnerable with others is that it creates that safe space for others to be vulnerable with us. By being vulnerable with each other, we can create a safe community and safe relationships in which vulnerability can thrive and grow. In doing this, we create a container for transformation to happen in relationship with one another. Vulnerability becomes the starting point of authenticity and connection, not only to ourselves, but to spirit and the world around us. It allows us to bring our own unique expression to life while extending the same invitation to everyone else. Having clear boundaries with yourself and others sets the stage and is an integral part of the process of being vulnerable. Remember, in March, we learned how sharing our boundaries with others creates that clear path so that there's a bridge for us to connect with one another. So there's another paragraph by this Ryan Anderson that I want to share. It's called Reshaping Our Collective Narrative. In fostering communities that nurture vulnerability and authenticity, we must understand the role of personal reflection and responsibility. We must be willing to say things like, wow, I really messed up there, or I'm sorry, I should have listened and communicated differently. This level of vulnerability requires us to see life from a wide variety of angles and understand how our thoughts, words, and actions directly affect the whole. Right? Vulnerability is not weakness. It's about showing up and being seen even in the face of fear and shame. The call is to begin to examine areas in our lives where we have been resistant, for whatever reason, to vulnerability. areas where searching for our own worthiness may have created a divide between who we truly are and who we pretend to be. The opportunity is to gain clarity and awareness of our connection with Spirit and how our connection with Spirit fuels our connection and authenticity with ourselves and others. So Ernest Holmes said, "Every one of us has in back of us the potential of the universe. There is an irresistible potential pressing against everyone for self-expression. If we listen, we shall hear it, not as a voice, but as a feeling, as a divine urge to express." And this points us to an understanding that the reality of our essence is the ability to express fully within this life. Just as we observe the movement of growth and vitality in nature, as the flowers are blooming and the grass is growing, that's the same blueprint that we have within our own souls to express fully in this life. This world may seek to put us in a box or try to suppress our authenticity. But if we're willing to be vulnerable, we can have the opportunity to live our greatest lives out loud. The willingness to take the risk of authentic living, even though doing so may open us up to challenges along the way, leads us to the very outpicturing of that irresistible potential within us that Ernest wrote about. So, beginning to wind down, I want to remind us that authenticity and meaningful connection are born out of vulnerability. Vulnerability allows us to build trust and intimacy in relationships, foster empathy and understanding, increase our sense of self-worth, build relationships with those who serve to support and love us, work together in partnership and community, work through and process emotions, increase our self-awareness and accountability, and opens us up to the possibility of expansion and transformation. So in conclusion, I want to share a paragraph by Carol Carnes, I believe is how she pronounces her last name, and then I'll share something that happened yesterday. So she's saying that there is profound spiritual strength in being an open book, as it were. What is there to hide when we know our true self is love and intelligence in ever-increasing expression? I know that sounds like the stuff of saints and sages, yet it is the very foundation of New Thought spirituality. Our self-identity is the clearest predictor of our experience. One of the more familiar sayings of our teachings is, change your thinking, change your life. And Carol would like to amend that to, change your self-identity and your life will change. I thought that was a powerful change that she wanted to make. So as life would have it, yesterday I got to go visit a very dear friend of mine whom I love and trust. And I got to share with them some of the deepest wounds that I've experienced in my life and how I got to heal from them in this community through the Science of Mind classes. And my friend pointed out to me that my deepest spiritual wound, which was being excommunicated from my church for choosing to be my authentic self, led me on a journey that has brought me right here to this point today to be able to help lead a spiritual center that not only encourages and supports us, but really urges us to be our authentic self, to show up in vulnerability with all our warts and wrinkles, and to let our light shine as only we can. How grateful I am to be part of an organization that celebrates the diversity of spirit in its multitudinous expressions, recognizing God in us, as us, is us. We are one, and so it is. Namaste.